This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Rugari, here as always with Tommy Orr. Thomas, what's cracking?
Not much. Another great episode. Can't wait to get stuck into it all.
It's going to be a great episode, mate. A lot to talk about as always in this beautiful, silly competition of ours, mate. A lot to look at in terms of the top of the ladder. Auckland FC look like they're stumbling a little bit.
Yep.
Bottom of the ladder, we'll sink our teeth into Perth Glory.
Yep.
Not a good season at all. Some records potentially to be broken there, which you'll be thankful for when we get into that a little bit later on.
Can't wait.
Also get into our off-contract 11 as well. Get our little our football manager on in a sense there. And there's some hot players coming off contract, man. If I'm a football director in the A-League right now, I'd be getting to work signing up a couple of these guys. Tell you what. But we'll start with our guest for this week. Really looking forward to this chat with Eli Adams of the Newcastle Jets, the breakout player in the A-League this season. Eli, it's an absolute pleasure to have you with us, mate.
No, thank you for having me, guys.
So how's the season been for you, Eli? You've been on fire from the start, mate. What's clicked into place for you individually for you to come out and be firing on all cylinders?
Not too much different, I guess. I've always, just loved to play football, and I think this season's been the perfect opportunity to, showcase what I've been able to do. And I think I've really taken the best of my opportunity.
Well, I've got to say, some great finishing, as everyone can see on their screens now, but 7 goals so far this season. But I want to ask you, because if we take a look back so far at your kind of A-League journey, obviously you had stints at the Brisbane Roar and then went on to Melbourne Victory, now at the Jets. How do you kind of analyse and look back at your time in the A-League so far at the other clubs as well? And what do you think has been different at the Jets? Do you think it's just been a matter of getting more opportunity to play, or do you think you've improved and learnt a lot as a player as well?
Yeah, no, I think I'm super grateful to, every club that I've been at. I think under every coach, every different environment has taught me different things that I've been able to really take on board and, make part of my identity, implement into my game. I'm super grateful for both Victory and Brisbane for everything they did for me. I think you saw some tremendous growth personally I did over those few years. Obviously, the opportunity wasn't necessarily shown to showcase that on the pitch in the league. So I think it's really thankful to the Newcastle Jets for everything they've done for me this season, and the coach Rob, the faith they've shown in me, and just trying to repay that this season.
Eli, before we get into a little bit more on the Jets this season, keen to know about your background as well in football. Talking before the show about my time in Queensland and Tommy Orr, a Queensland football great. What was it like for you growing up in Toowoomba, where not too many professional footballers come out of there? What inspired you to get involved in the game?
It's quite the funny story, I guess. You don't really see too many country kids make it into the big time in football, but I think around 10 years old I started playing football, and it was just a simple case of the younger brother wants to do what the older brother does. So for me, he was always playing. He's a few years older than me. And then as you get older, you get a bit more competitive and you want to start, one-upping the older brother. So for me, that was the case, and it just led on to one thing being the next.
There you go. It's pretty similar to my story, actually. But I've got to ask you as well. We did some digging off air before the show, and we saw that you did a trial at Bayern Munich earlier in your career. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I couldn't tell you what year, maybe 2021, 2020. I got the opportunity to head over to Germany and have a trial at a few clubs over there. And while I was over there, we got the call saying Bayern Munich would love to have a look at you and give a week or two at their campus. So, it was an unreal opportunity and, real eye-opening to see the difference in, how environments are over in Europe compared to everything that we see in Australia. And I think, it was just something so surreal. I mean, we had one of the sessions where Jamal Musiala was there, and
wow.
There's no surprise where he is now after being able to have a session with him. But it's incredible to see how things are on the other side of the world, and hopefully, in the future, I can get back over there.
That's what I was going to ask you about, mate. You must have an itch that you'd be keen to scratch, not only from that experience, but as we said before, a terrific season in the A-League so far. That must be pretty high up on your bucket list. Yeah,
no, I think it's every young kid's dream is to reach the the pinnacle of football in Europe. And Australia, certainly you've seen that growth over the last few years where there's so many young players, really shining and getting that opportunity to play in Europe. And I think, for me, it's something that I want to do. I just want to keep improving. And if one thing leads to the next, hopefully it's a spot in Europe somewhere and follow some of the other Australian greats that have played over there.
Mate, I've got to ask you, obviously huge game this weekend, F1 Derby. Had a disappointing result last weekend, obviously, against the Knicks, but how's the team shaping up for what is obviously a huge game for you and the club?
Yeah, no, it's always, a bit more energetic, a bit more chaotic going into derbies, and I think it'll be no different. We're in a position where the finals aren't written off completely. We need maybe a few results to go our way and whatnot now. But, for us, it's, all eyes are focused on this weekend, getting that 3 points and really paying back to the fans they're showing. I think we haven't won a derby in a while. So to be able to do it at home at the Jets, McDonald Jones Stadium, it would be something special for the fans.
Just finally, Eli, it looks like you've thrived this season under Rob Stanton. Just wondering how you took the news that he wouldn't be there next season, how that's affected the playing group, and also, what you're hoping happens with the next coach. Yeah, no, I'm super grateful to him. He's really shown faith in me this year and given me that opportunity to shine. I think it's an interesting situation. However, we have 4 games left this season. He's our coach for those 4 games. So we still listen to him and we'll treat every game like it's a final for us because we want to make finals at the end. So looking past that, there's not too much focus on that. I think the main priority is this next month and doing the best we can. Good attitude, mate. Yeah. Thanks for jumping on the show, mate. We really appreciate it. Best of luck for the upcoming game and the rest of the season.
Thanks so much, mate.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Great to chat.
Ledge, man.
Friendly guy.
I like him. Yeah, good kid.
Same.
Graceful
grounded.
Player, as you said last week as well.
On and off the pitch.
100%, man.
Yeah.
European clubs, I know that European clubs look at bloody 14, 15-year-olds who are talented in Australia at NPL level. So they'd be well and truly aware of Eli Adams.
Absolutely.
What country or what league do you think he should be looking at, or clubs will be looking at him that matches? Well,
I think that we obviously touched on it in that interview. I think the thing that has been different for him in his journey so far this season has just been the opportunity to play. So we see it and we talk about it a lot. Players moving on to go somewhere maybe a higher level, but not playing, and ultimately, on a personal level, that kind of takes you backwards. So, if he does decide to move on or that opportunity does present itself, I would hate to see him go and sit on the bench somewhere because I feel like he's improving every week. We saw some of the finishing, on the highlights reel just then, top class finishing, and I think that he's really maturing into an exciting player. So watch this space, I guess.
You played in Holland. Would he fit in there, with his talents?
Absolutely. I think that, his strength in one-on-one duels, they love their wide players to take players on. And he's also, he works hard as well. He's not a player that, he's going to shy away from kind of tracking back and doing his dirty work for the team that he's doing. So I think there's a lot to like about him. I still think there's a lot of improvement there. And, maybe one more season in the A-League wouldn't be the worst thing, I think.
I just like his story of persistence. Didn't break through at Brisbane Roar properly, didn't break through at Melbourne Victory properly, but... not too many people thought he'd have the season he's having right now, and I just love those stories, to be honest.
Absolutely, agree.
Yeah. Yep. Tommy, to the top of the table, Auckland FC, man. Yeah. We've been sort of umming and ahhing every week on here. Is the title sewn up? Yep. Are they having a bump? Is this real? Sort of... What do you think after the weekend's game, man? 1-1 with the Wanderers. Interesting game, like a pretty entertaining game, I thought.
It was. It was a great game. Great game. And it's two teams, two of the best teams in the comp, clearly. I thought it was a really high-standard game. I think that...
Except maybe for the goals.
No, well, obviously two kind of costly errors, but I think this is, if you look at Auckland, I think this is a tiny bit of a blip, and that's obviously holding them to a very high standard. But the one thing I can say is that they've obviously drawn 4 out of their last 5 games. They still find a way, even if the football's not doing the same things it was at their best earlier in the season, to find a way to grind out a result. And, they did it again in this game. They rode their luck at times. Wanderers, on the counter-attack was lethal, and we know how dangerous they are. But at the same time, I still think all the right ingredients are there for them to go on to win the league. And I think that, it's still in their hands, and they're still doing a lot of the right things.
The blip is interesting, the nature of the blip as well. Let's hear quickly from Steve Corica explaining a little bit about what he sees as their problems at the moment.
They just looked a little bit hungrier than us, wanted to win the ball. You know, it was quite a physical game early on in the first half. It's always quite tight, but it seemed like the ball was popping out to them a lot. And, you know, we spoke about that during the week, that we have to win the second balls because they're quite dangerous if they do pick up the second balls with their front two and their two wingers coming inside. So, yeah, we didn't manage to do that, or wasn't really happy with what we did in the first half, but I think second half was a lot better. I think the last couple of games with the ball, we probably haven't been at our best, even though we created a fair bit of chances tonight in the second half. But no, I think we've got better over the period of time. You know, even the game against Adelaide, we played some good football in that. We conceded late. Central Coast, we played really good football, and we conceded late as well. You know, we've done that to teams as well, and sometimes we've got to take it on the chin. But, you know, the boys are working hard, real desire to keep going and to win.
Hungrier, one of the first words he said in that clip, which stuck with me, Tommy. And it's interesting, like, I can understand how if you've been on top of the table for so long in the season and you had a decent gap, that you might let your standards slip a little bit. But also, if the title's within reach, I mean, there may be another win or two, or, you know, depending on results, away from clinching it. I don't know about you. I'd be pretty hungry in that situation to get it done, so you don't have to worry anymore.
Well, I think it's not a lack of effort. I think that the intensity that they're playing with, you know, if you look earlier in the season, the reason they were winning a lot of games was the intensity that they played with. And I think that not only have they maybe dropped a level, I think other teams around them have probably notched it up a little bit as well. I think the Wanderers, for example, in the game on the weekend, that was, you know, as good as they've played so far this season. So, you know, the teams around them are kind of learning how to play against them as well, and I think that's been a problem, and they've not been as emphatic as they were at other parts of the season. But at the same time, you know, obviously Corica just spoke about, you know, now being on the wrong end of conceding late goals, but at the same time, Sakai had a 90th minute chance on the weekend, and if he puts that away, then we're talking about how they've done it again and gone on to score a winner. So, you know, I think games are ultimately decided in both boxes, and I think, you know, they haven't been as clinical in some moments in recent weeks than they were earlier in the season. 2
tough away trips coming up for them as well. Sydney FC, who we'll speak about in a moment, here in Sydney, and then victory away.
Yeah.
I mean, are there harder away trips? Like, you know, like the hardest away trip is probably going to Auckland at the moment. They can't do that. But here, 2 weeks in a row against two teams that on their day can be anything.
It's true. And I think the one thing they will take confidence from is that, you know, they're playing Sydney FC, who are having to back up, you know, after playing a huge game midweek, you know, obviously in the ACL too. They haven't done that well so far this season in Sydney FC. So I think Auckland will be looking at that and thinking, if we play with a really high intensity, then Sydney FC might struggle physically to compete with us. And I still think that they have a big advantage in this game. And if they do beat Sydney FC, I think the titles is pretty much theirs to lose from that point. So, you know, there's so much to play for, and there's a big carrot for them at the end of this weekend.
This will be Steve Corica's first trip back to, well, the blue half of Sydney. As Auckland FC coach will be interesting. We saw him fire up at a couple of punters at the Adelaide United game, I think, a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
He'll be looking forward to this, don't you think? Knowing the character of Bimby.
Huge. And I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of reception he gets from Sydney FC as well. Obviously, it should be a very positive one, but, you know, Sydney FC's in a little bit of an anxious period for their own season. So, you know, obviously the league leaders to go to Sydney FC, it might be an awkward moment for him to go there, but at the same time, I'm sure this is one he'll really want to win.
Yeah, that reception will be interesting. Hopefully he gets a bit of love, because he deserves it from Sydney FC as well.
Definitely.
But then, you know, probably a little bit of stick as well once the game starts, and, you know, once the tension's high as well.
Exactly. So it should be a great game, actually.
It will. So Sydney, I still can't work them out, man.
Yeah.
Like, there have been times where I'm like, man, what an unbelievable team. And then it's almost like they've got one of the best front halves in the competition, filled with star individual players, and then a back line that just, like, who knows? I mean, Adelaide had, you know, They cut through them pretty easily.
They did.
Way too easily.
And I think that, you know, if you look at the goals Sydney FC score too, I think a lot of them, they weren't really, they're kind of moments of individual brilliance.
Look at that though, balls over the top.
Exactly, and that's been the big problem for them. They've still managed with the quality they have in the front third to score goals, but defensively, obviously have some injuries now they've had to deal with as well. Hayden Matthews, as we've talked about many times, departing. There's still big question marks defensively, and I think that the spaces they're leaving between the lines, you know, if I'm an attacker and I want to be playing against Sydney FC, because you look at the amount of space this guy has, he can get the ball run at the defender, and it feels like they're just giving too much respect to the other teams. And it's a team that's defending very nervously, and I think that's not a good sign for Steve Corica. But for Ufuk Talay, I should say. But at the same time, they're still capable of winning games. Obviously, won again on the weekend, and you can never rule them out. With the quality they have in their squad, you can just never rule them out.
No, and that's sort of, they finished the game in that respect, and we'll talk about Segecic at the moment.
Yeah.
But like at the back, you think about it though, they've not really been able to build any consistency in terms of a back four at all. Courtney Perkins, great left back, sometimes played centre back, sometimes played further up.
Yep.
Joel King can play left back, right back. Ryan Grant, they play him centre back sometimes. They did play him right back before.
Yeah.
Popovich injured in and out. Alex Grant went off before halftime there as well. Hayden Matthews left.
That's right.
They had Kyle Shaw in for a game or two as well. So the best teams sort of have that consistency. That the back four, they don't need to sort of talk to each other to understand what they're doing. They've never had that this season.
It's true, and I think that they're not getting the support defensively from the midfield as well. I think that the amount of times you see a 4-against-4 situation kind of unfold, they look very exposed defensively. But you just touched on it. I think that if you look at the injuries and the players they have available, Ryan Grant and Joel King are probably going to be the centre-back pairing for this weekend, or that they're huge contention to be. And that's two fullbacks playing centre-back, so that's not ideal.
Not particularly tall ones.
No, that's right. It doesn't instill a lot of confidence. It's not to say they can't do a job there, but if you're talking about teams with ambitions to go on to win a title or to get into the finals, I think that's going to be their Achilles heel.
Totally. Adrian Segecic just keeps on coming off the bench and changing games, and we keep asking the question, what's he got to do to get a start? And I can understand sort of when you've got a player who impacts the game off the bench and does it consistently. That's a good weapon to have in football, particularly in this league, But also, you want your best players in from the start, right?
Well, and I think absolutely, I agree. I think that he's been, probably hard done by. You do see it a lot where players can, if they do so well off the bench, I think Enrique used to do it at Brisbane Roar as well, who'd always come on and make a difference, and he kind of shoehorned himself into that role. But I think that if he was to start, a good run of games, I think we could see that form translate into 90-minute performances. I think that the games where he has started and the first half hasn't been convincing, he's always been the scapegoat. They've always just, subbed him off at half time when other players have probably performed equally as poor in that half. So I do think that, it's a little bit disappointing to see, but at the same time, you look at the players who are playing, they have such a luxury of options in the front third. I don't envy him because whoever he leaves out, it's obviously going to be a talking point.
Yeah. Well, let's hear from Ufuk Talay now, talking about Sydney FC more broadly, but also the question of Adrian Segecic and what he has to do to get a start.
Yeah, look, we score goals, but we leak a lot of goals, and similar to Adelaide as well. Adelaide have scored a lot of goals this season, but also conceded a lot of goals. So that's the disappointing part from our game. I think it was quite disappointing, even across the second goal. I think we can deal with it a lot better. I think the position in the box isn't good. We work on having 3+1 in there. Geordie's a little bit out of position, but if Geordie's there, he deals with the cross, he deals with the header as well. Yeah, I think I answered this question last week in my presser as well with Sega. Look, I know every player wants to play. No player wants to sit on the bench. But at this stage, what Sego is producing and the energy that he brings when he comes on to the field has been very influential for us this season. If you look at his stats, he's scored more goals probably coming off the bench than he has starting a game. So as much as an individual, he probably doesn't like that he's not starting, but he's still influencing the impact of the game, and he's influencing, and he should be happy that he's actually scoring goals as well.
The other thing we've got to think about with Sydney FC, Tommy, is tonight they play Lion City Sailors in the first leg of the ACL2 semi-final in Singapore, which complicates things a little bit with the league stuff as well. And the question is, can they even afford to go full strength against Auckland? We know, Douglas Costa, they've got to treat him really carefully because they don't want that hamstring to go again, especially when he's in this sort of form. So it's a difficult period to manage here for them.
I think if you look at their squad, I think the front third and the way they've kind of navigated the ACL so far, I think they do have kind of enough options in those positions to mix it up a little bit. The likes of Quintal and Kaczarski, who probably haven't played too many minutes in the league. I think that, you can expect to see them play more in the next kind of 7 days and in the next 3 fixtures. But I think defensively, they just don't have the numbers. I think that these players are going to have to back up, and I think that's going to make the game this weekend against Auckland even more difficult, is the physical toll that the players, and the mental toll, for example, as well, because playing a huge finals game in Asia and then backing up against the league leaders is not an easy thing to do.
No, it will be interesting to see how they deal with it and, whether Auckland can take advantage as they need to.
Yep.
Adelaide United, Tommy, what about them? What's going wrong there? I can't quite put my finger on it either, can you?
Well, I think we spoke about it a little bit last week on the show. I think if you look at their performances, and even earlier in the season when they were doing really well, they were going forward really threatening, but they still defensively did look a little bit kind of vulnerable. I think other teams have kind of figured them out. If you look at the players they have in the fullback positions, they're very offensive-minded players, and I think that other teams they basically see if we can attack really quickly and directly in the wide areas, they're vulnerable, and I think that that's kind of ringing true. And I think the concerning thing for Adelaide is that week in, week out, the same things keep happening, and they haven't found a way to address those defensive problems. And obviously, that takes a toll in terms of confidence on a team as well, and that's kind of what's played out. And the game against Sydney on the weekend, to lose it in the manner they did so late was a hammer blow for them, but obviously there's still enough time for them to turn things around.
Especially with the fixture list they've got coming up as well. For a team in free fall, to have Perth, Wellington, Brisbane as your next three.
Yep.
Especially with the top 6 berth potentially on the line here for them. They've got to be taking, what are you saying, 7 points minimum from those 3 games?
I think
it must be 9, really, right?
Well, that's right. And if you look beyond that, I think if they want to go to finals and really give it a shake, which is of course should be the ambition, then these are games they probably need to win anyway. So if they can't win these games, then in the finals, what's going to allow them to beat the likes of Melbourne City, to beat the likes of Western United? So, I think that the next 3 games for them is season defining, and I think there's still enough promising things they're doing, obviously scoring lots of goals, like Goodwin's on fire. But defensively, I think there's some serious questions for Carl Viet.
There are, and there's serious questions about Carl Viet as well. We don't know whether he's going to be the coach next season. The lads on A-League Download had a chat about his situation.
What do you make of the pressure on Carl Viet?
Oh, yeah, I think it's a little bit harsh, to be honest. If you look at the stats of since he's been in that head role, I think Adelaide have made a couple of semi-finals. They've managed to blood a lot of young, talented players and sell them off and make money for the club. And then, there's been this 2-month period where they've just lost their way big time. And I guess it's that maybe people have seen, but they forget very quickly about what Carl Viet's done. I feel like he doesn't deserve this pressure. And I've really got to take my hat off to him too, because a lot of the... I think interviews after the game, before the game, were talking about his future, and you could just see the integrity of the man. It was, just business as usual, not really trying to focus on as much as that could be such a big pressure on someone. But I just think it's not warranted, to be honest.
Yeah, and where do they go? I think with Adelaide, it seems like a club where, especially with all the young talent, that you need someone who knows that in and out, who knows those young players, who can. And he's done a great job with that. And is that not really what is their big priority? Because that's been their success. Iran Kunda, other players have come through there, and now they've got Kikianis, they've got several other young players that they can feed on. And I don't know, unless, but I think you can see with ownership, they always want more, and it's never good enough. But sometimes the grass is not always green on the other side.
Archie wins the kit battle there for me, Tommy. That's pretty
Timeless.
fresh on sleeve as well. And apt as well, talking about Adelaide United, funnily enough, because the ownership has links to PSV, and it's Ernest Faber, the football director, who's apparently the one who's been talking to Carl Viet and potentially raising the prospect of bringing in a Dutch coach next season. He's been there since 2020, Carl Viet, club legend, so they need to, for my money at least, be really careful with how they navigate in a situation like this. You don't want to burn your club greats, especially, And also, there's a lot of goodwill from the fan side here too. Obviously the fans love him. So, if they, as you touched on, if they obviously don't do the right thing by him, that can leave a bad taste in fans' mouths as well. Is it right for him to be under the pump a little bit though? Well, if you look objectively, it's obviously a results business. I agree with everything that Archie and Tommy Sorensen were saying, but last year they missed out in the finals. This year, they're on course to miss out in the finals. That can obviously change very quickly. But I think that is the frustrating thing, is that there's been so many promising signs and he's done such a good job with, probably limited budget and all these things. But ultimately, not making finals 2 seasons in a row would be, it is probably not
enough for an ambitious club like Adelaide. And, obviously they're such a well-supported team and they've been so exciting to watch. So as a neutral, I want to see him and the team be very successful. But I do think that, his future probably rides on them making finals this year.
You're probably right. But I think, as we might have said last week, if he goes, I think there's other clubs that could and should have him. I reckon
Definitely.
He's a good coach. Another good coach, Tommy, Alen Stajcic, he's got the Wanderers absolutely firing at the moment. So they're on their longest unbeaten run in 10 years. They're on 8 games at the moment. That previous streak was 10 games as well. They might be in danger of beating that one or matching it. Who knows, Tommy? But they're, all the questions I've personally been asking of them anyway, they're answering it.
That's right. I think if you look early in the season, and we on this show were critical of them at times, I think particularly defensively, because going forward, you look at their players and how mobile they are on the front third, they were always capable, especially in transition, of scoring goals, and they always looked likely. But defensively, it just looked like they were too naive and probably not resilient enough defensively. But you got to give Alen Stajcic a lot of credit because he's really addressed those issues. We just spoke about Adelaide and how defensively they are conceding a lot of goals. They're a team that hasn't been able to address those problems. It's a complete opposite for the Wanderers, and I think that they've developed a kind of mentality where they're really difficult to break down. They don't always try and overplay, which I think they were trying to do at the start of the season. They sometimes keep things simple defensively, and then with the quality they have in the front third, they're always capable of scoring goals, which is what they've been doing.
Yeah. I stand by our bigger picture criticisms of the club in terms of identity, what do they want to be, all that sort of stuff, because it has seemed to waver. But I reckon if this is who they want to be, then enshrine it, decide this is our style. Let that sort of dictate your recruitment and your academy stuff, so that the next coach after Staj will play Staj's way.
Exactly, and Staj obviously signed allegedly a short-term contract there. I think he's done enough for him to extend that, and they should give him the confidence to go and build upon the foundation he's created now, because obviously there's still a lot to play out this season. I still think the Wanderers could really give the finals a good shake. They're making all the right noises, and the kind of football they play is good finals football, because being defensively kind of stubborn and hard to beat, and then having the players they do, Milanovic obviously in scintillating form, Borrello, these kinds of players on the counter-attack. Nobody wants to play teams like that. No.
Interesting question around Milanovic and what they do in the off-season coming up, because he's contracted until the end of next season. And I don't know, at his age, will he be looking to sign another contract with the Wanderers? Probably not. He'll probably be looking to give Europe a crack. And so the question then becomes, what does the club do? If they're going to get anything for him, they need to sell him.
Yeah, I think that the club will be looking at this, this off-season and hoping that he can attract some interest from overseas. I'm sure he's attracting significant interest, but I'm sure that they'll be looking to kind of earn some money for him. And if that doesn't eventuate, I think that day one pre-season they might come to him and with a contract offer for an extension. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. Looking at his age and what he's done the last 2 seasons, I think the time is right for him to probably move on, and I think Europe's calling for sure.
Yeah, he's got levels, I reckon, as well. So the Wanderers play Western United, and the Wanderers are running a $1 ticket promotion for any grassroots players out there. So if you're around in Sydney on Sunday, and you're a registered player, I'd be taking up that offer, because this is going to be
a huge,
absolutely belting game, Tommy, against the Western United side that,
again,
is just knocking down sort of doubters and all that sort of stuff. Mate, and with Auckland wavering a little bit, these guys are sort of, they're finishing strong. Granted. They did play Perth at home, and that's about as easy as it gets at home in this competition. But
and these are 2 teams, obviously Western Sydney and Western United, that love scoring goals and love attacking. So it has all the ingredients for a fantastic game. But obviously talking about Western United, they just keep finding a way, and they actually didn't have it all their own way in this game. Perth created probably more opportunities in this game than they have, in previous games. But at the same time, in the front third, Western United always decisive. They were clinical again. I think that's been a real key for them, is how clinical they've been in the front third. And, if you're scoring 3 goals in a game, then you're always likely to get a good result, and that's kind of what's been happening.
If they win this game, title race on?
Big time. I think you look at Auckland's fixture list coming up, some really tough games. Obviously, they play Auckland last. That's one to keep an eye on. Melbourne City as well is obviously in the mix, so...
Could be the biggest thing to ever happen in Tarneet, I reckon. Not sure what number 2 would be, to be fair.
That's true.
But it seems to be building toward that being a really decisive game, which is pretty exciting. Tommy, John Aloisi, he still doesn't, for me, and I I don't know why people don't sort of give him the respect he deserves as a coach. Maybe he's going to be demanding it soon enough if they go all the way this season. But I don't know. What is it? Why do people... I mean, you've played under him.
Yeah.
You know exactly how good he is.
Any player that's played under him, I think, only has great things to say about him. I think the one thing that stood out about him for me was tactically. If you look at his, career as a player, he played in Serie A, La Liga, England. He's kind of experienced and seen it all tactically, and I think that his kind of wealth of knowledge.
Not to mention the highest highs a Socceroo's player can possibly experience.
Of course, and I think that, just the tactical maturity he has and what he's been exposed to in his footballing life, not many players have, or not many coaches or football people have that wealth of experience in different competitions, different cultures. He brings it all together. He's a great man manager. Every player wants to play for him. I think he's a fantastic coach, and it would be a shame for a Western United perspective to see him leave, because what he's done there, I think, especially this season, nobody, going into the season was expecting them to do anything, to be honest. And what he's done with a limited budget and limited resources has been amazing.
Could you imagine going back in time and saying the words Matildas coach John Aloisi? Yeah. Bit of a trip out, but that's a real possibility. He's being reported as he's been tapped up as an option by Football Australia without wanting to step too much into dub zone territory.
Yeah.
It looks like Joe Montemuro is the number one candidate, number one target, but there's no guarantee that he's going to step down from Lyon in France at the end of the season to join the Matildas. And Aloisi's not a bad number two, but
yeah.
I don't know. Would you be keen for that job if you're John Aloisi?
Well, I mean, if you ask me, I would love to see John Aloisi take that job, because, as an Australian, I want to see the Matildas do well, and I think that he would do that. I think he's a fantastic coach, whatever direction he decides to go in his career. I'm not sure what his aspirations are, but I think that he's got a really high ceiling. We've seen other Aussie coaches go overseas and make a name for themselves in Asia and in Europe. If he has that ambition to go over there, I think that he's more than capable of doing the same thing. But also domestically, if you look at Melbourne Victory, Sydney FC, Western Sydney, big picture, I think that John Aloisi should be a name on every team's radar in the A-League.
Yeah, agree. Tommy, the worst A-League goal difference of all time was your Mariners. Was that 2015, 16, something like that?
A bit later. Thanks for reminding me.
2018.
Thanks for reminding me.
And were you a left back in this team? Were you playing left back a little bit, or how much responsibility are we going to put on you for the minus 37?
I wasn't a left back. I was actually in the stands, injured most of that season.
Well, that's why, is it?
Well, I was going to say, if I played left back, it might have been even worse. so it's probably dodged a bullet, you could say there, the Mariners. But no, I mean, obviously very unwanted record. I think that Perth's performances this season obviously haven't been great, but I think they have improved recently. But this is just a team that has no belief, and the coaching staff has not been able to turn that around, and I think it's getting to unwanted territory for them for sure.
Yeah, especially since some of the players they've brought in during the middle of the season you'd think would help reverse results. It hasn't happened, and the mood around the club and the fans just feel totally defeated. It does look like a pretty difficult situation for David Zulich in terms of the future. Like a change may need to be made there in the off-season. They're not going to do anything until the off-season, but it's tough to imagine a coach coming back from this kind of situation.
And I feel for the fans, because, I saw they made a comment saying that there's going to be a review after the season. I think that the review should be happening weekly. I think that whether teams are doing well or poorly, they need to be constantly reviewing how things are going to make sure they're on the right track. And if they're not, make decisions to try and improve it. There's no point. What's waiting to the end of the season going to achieve? And if you look at trying to turn things around, I think that the fans and the players and the whole club need some direction and some clarity about what's kind of happening going forward. Because if you want things to change next season, there needs to be a kind of blueprint that they're working towards. Whereas at the moment, it just feels like it's a club that's really lacking direction.
Totally. Let's hear a little bit now from David Zulich.
I think it would be a different story if they were just playing badly and we just got no chance and they're just coming at us, and that was happening at the start of this group's different. We're actually dominating games and moments in game. I can only put it down to the position of the table, and it's actually not unique in the A-League, because I've watched actually Western United last year and very closely, and I was like, this team is much better than what they were performing last. They were performing well last year, but they weren't getting the results and conceding similar goals. And it's the weight of the table position that in those moments. Because the rest of the game is quite fine. This game's a little bit different. We allowed few chances at the ends. But the other games, honestly, we conceded 3 goals on it. Sometimes I don't know how those goals were conceded. So the weight of the table is puts pressure on moments in the game more than when you're up the top.
I don't know how much I'm buying that, Tommy, but what I do know is if you're Perth and you're going to do the review at the end of the season, he needs a result of some form in this game against Adelaide. It's their last home game of the season, and
needs to give them something to cheer about.
And Adelaide at the moment are quite vulnerable as well.
Yeah.
So, at some point it does come on the coach to sort of reverse this mentality. Something's got to happen here.
Yeah, and he just touched on it. If that is true, I think a coach's responsibility is not only about the tactics, it's about instilling belief in the players. And he basically, described a playing group that is void of belief completely. And I think that that's something ultimately the manager, rightly or wrongly, has to take responsibility for. So he's got, not many weeks left to turn it around.
Yeah. Tommy, let's hear from the team on Dub Zone, where the A-League women's title race has gone down to the wire.
Coming up on Dub Zone, dynamic duo Aideen Keane and Maya Markovski join us ahead of Canberra United's huge weekend. Victory narrows City's lead at the top of the table to just 2 points, and we'll break down all the storylines and the finals permutations going into the last fortnight of the Ninja A-League. Taylor and Teresa will again join me this week with their highlights from the international break.
Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the 2 international games and seeing Holly McNamara make 2 starts for the Matildas and fit in really well.
We only got 1 Ninja A-League game during the international weekend, but it was one you couldn't afford to miss, and I'm looking forward to breaking it all down.
We'll have all that ahead of another edition of Dub Zone. Catch us on the A-League's website, app, YouTube channel and 10Play.
Tommy, let's finish off with extra time as always, mate. We'll start with Isuzu. Played his 250th game at the weekend, the highest ever for a foreigner, even though he's an Aussie citizen now. And Adelaide's pretty good at that. A lot of the foreigners who move to South Australia tend to stay full-time because it's such an amazing, beautiful state filled with glorious people. Where does he rank for you in terms of A-League all-time imports?
Oh, he's up there. I think obviously longevity is one thing, but also just his influence. If obviously you remember the goal in the grand final he scored, he's been involved in some huge moments. And just, technically such a good player, controls games. I love him. I love everything he's about.
Tommy, your top 5 A-League coaches of all time, please.
Ian Giannani are the first 2 names that spring to mind. You have to say probably Popper, Corica, I think, for his success at Sydney FC. And
there's a
Kevin
pretty obvious
Muscat.
one. Thank
Kevin
you very
Muscat.
much.
That's who
That's
it is.
the 5 for me.
Yeah.
Tommy, the PFA is promoting an initiative called The Great Save, which is out of the UK. It's all about tackling the waste of football kits, making sure that if you have an old football kit, you use it, or you reuse it, or you donate it, or you upcycle it, which is what I've done with a few kits that I've collected over the years. This is this is all courtesy of Unwanted FC, by the way, as well, who do some great work. This is an old kit from Leichhardt FC up in Cairns, which I've turned into my gym bag. I think is outstanding. This shirt was falling to bits before I sent it to them, and they turned it into something useful. But wait, there's more. This is insane.
Yeah, this is awesome.
This is a Northern Spirit bucket hat. I don't know if I could ever wear this, but it's pretty sick to have.
Yeah. Flies right under the radar too.
And when you're at a music festival wearing that, you can also have this around your neck as well. The sponsor logo on this Gold Coast United jersey was peeling off.
There you go.
So I thought, what am I going to do with this? Turn it into a side bag. So there you go.
It's a great initiative. Mine's a bit more straight up and down the line. Great jersey. Awesome. Long sleeve, number 10 as well. So, I think that it's a great initiative and hopefully can see everyone involved in it.
Finally, your tip to win the Johnny Warren medal. Give me your top 3 candidates, if you can.
This is a really hard one.
Open race.
And we spoke about it off air because there's no, the Aaron Moyes famous season at Melbourne City where he just... And that's the thing. But there's always been a standout player. Yeah. And this year, I feel like it's a very even field. But it wouldn't surprise me if an attacking player doesn't win it this year. Someone like Angus Thurgate, I think, has been fantastic. Noah Botic is another one. Milanovic as well. Obviously, if Western Sydney go on a run, I think he's more than capable. But there's no one. I think that the next 5 or 4 rounds and finals will be decisive.
We'll see, Tommy.
That's it.
Another rep in the books, man.
That's great.
Well played.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching. We'll catch you next week.